Please give it up for Mike Little.
Go to sleep, so I need to log in. Long password, paranoid, much more secure. Okay, it went in. Cool. So, yeah, my name's Mike Little. I don't have 20 domains in my own name. I think it's 13. That's fine, isn't it? That's normal. So I'm going to talk about my tech story and a brief history of WordPress. I'm probably going to refer to my notes quite regularly, but we'll see how we go. So there's me. I'm the WordPress co-founder. I'm going to talk about my start in life and my start in tech, and then I'm going to move on to WordPress, how that thing happened. That's one of my Mike Little domains. I work part-time for a company called Human Made, and there's my LinkedIn, which is, yeah, LinkedIn. So, the beginning, I'm going to start right at the beginning. So, May 1962, I was born. I'm mixed race. I have a Nigerian father and a white British mother. I say I have them, I don't know them. I was fostered at 4 months old. Whoops, oh, this is going fast. Fostered at 4 months old to an all-white family who had a couple of kids of their own and fostered lots more kids as well, of all colours. I was eventually adopted around 10 years old, along with my sister, who came along as well from the same parents, so they did it again, and they didn't want that one either. And I grew up in the 60s and the 70s, so some of you might be old enough to remember what it was like to be black in a white community in that era. The media, the TV, the people, it wasn't ideal. But I went to school. I was privileged enough to go to a grammar school, having passed the 11 plus. I did okay at that. And I got through to the sixth form and got taken to the local college where I got my first encounter with a computer. It was a teletype, which is basically like a computer except it doesn't have a screen. What you type comes out on a printer at the back. And I programmed in BASIC, and I saved my program on pink punched tape. Some of you won't know what that means, but it's really, really old tech. That was 1978. Anyway, fast forward a few years, and I did get to the sixth form. I dropped out of sixth form. I actually got bored, which is crazy, but I did. I got working I started with a quick tech job, electronics, and then rather strangely, I got headhunted to a record shop. And I worked in the music industry for a while, working with local bands and so on. So this is the early 80s, post-punk. And one of the bands that I worked with decided that they want to do something really fancy with these computer things, and put some graphics up at the side of the stage. So, whoops. Yeah, this is going too fast. So we borrowed a Sinclair ZX Spectrum, which was mentioned earlier. And I actually took some software from a magazine, back when you bought magazines to learn computing, from actually 2 different issues of that magazine. One that would let you type in a word and bring it up as a 3D object, and another one that would allow you to bounce an object around the screen. And I combined those 2 to create some computer graphics for this post-punk band who fancied themselves as the next Human League. Sadly, the hardware got me in the end, and I couldn't figure out how to connect this Sinclair Spectrum up to multiple TVs at the side of the stage. But I got bitten by the bug, so I really got into software development. I loved solving the problems, and there were a number of problems with those. And I almost feel that that's my first encounter with open source. These people were sharing their software in magazines, allowing you to type it in, and I took these 2 freely available programs and combined them together to make something new. So let's fast forward a little bit, and I got my first PC. It was one of these, although it wasn't actually IBM, it was an IBM knockoff, but it was a green screen. I think it had 2 floppy drives and a 20 megabyte hard disk. 20 megabyte hard disk. Who even knows how small that is these days? But I learned to program on that. I learned Pascal because I went to the library and got a book and it told me that Pascal was the great language to start programming with. Yeah, okay, that didn't work. Fast forward to 1990 and I got my, oh, sorry, and I'll also mention that I got a modem and I actually worked with open source for real in those mid-80s. Fast forward to the 1990 and I got my first professional programming job. I discovered then that Pascal was not a good language to have learned at first, but I worked for an industrial software company. I learned to program in C, working on production code. It's really not recommended, but that was back then in those pioneering days. And I worked on C, I worked with C++, I worked with Java, and a number of different things. We worked on an awful lot of stuff. And then this kind of World Wide Web thing came along. And by the kind of early 90s, 92, 94, I kind of got interested in this. So I built a couple of web pages with some HTML. I moved to another job where I got to work on the web with Java and J2EE. If anybody's used J2EE, I don't think they call it that anymore, but it was the enterprise edition of Java. And it was really geared towards enterprise scale websites and things like that. I worked on a number of different projects. And by the 2000s, I got into this blogging thing, and I started blogging with this tool called B2 Cafe Log. It was a blogging tool. It was open source. It was written in PHP, used MySQL, and it was really interesting. I loved the fact that I could look at the code. I loved the fact that it was open source. I was already a huge advocate of open source by that time. And been using it for a while, about, I don't know, 10 months in, something like that. The author of this software, a guy called Michel Valdrigi, who was based in France, disappeared off the net. So people who knew him in real life didn't know where he was. They said his mobile phone wasn't working, and then eventually they went to his flat and his flat was empty. A few people were worried, and another user of that software, a guy called Matt Mullenweg in the States, wrote a blog post called The Blogging Software Dilemma, where he talked about the fact that he tried lots of different blogging tools like I had, and he'd settled on this one, and now the guy behind it had disappeared, and there were issues with the code, and even the domain was coming up for renewal. So he wrote a blog post about this, and he mentioned it's GPL, which means that he could use it as an existing code base to create a fork. And yeah, if he fell off the face of the planet, anybody would be free to pick it up. And I responded with a comment on that blog post. If you're serious about forking B2, I would be interested in contributing. I'm sure there are 1 or 2 others in the community who would be too. Perhaps a post to the B2 forum suggesting a fork would be a good starting point. That comment became the kickoff point for what eventually became WordPress. Interestingly, somebody pointed out to me many, many years later, that was the only response to that blog post. The next comment was a year later celebrating the fact that WordPress had been going for a year. Yeah, interesting times. It became WordPress, the open source content management system, although at the time it was WordPress, the blogging system. It wasn't really content management, but it was open source. And we quickly accumulated people, volunteers, who helped out build the software. If you're in the WordPress world, some kind of famous names, some really interesting people. A guy called Donachie O'Keefe joined really quickly after we got that first release out. I should point out the first release was May 2003. And in fact, just a few days before that first release came out, Michel came back on the scene. So, phew. He was okay. He just, I think, lost his job and had to go back home, something like that. The internet suddenly wasn't that important. But he declared us the official successors to B2. I'll say that because there was more than one fork of B2. And one of them, in fact, was by Donachie O'Keefe, who joined our project. And he had a multi-user version or a multi-site version of WordPress called B2++, which eventually got incorporated into WordPress, although in the very early days and for far too long, it was actually a separate version of WordPress that was kind of 95% the same. Various other people joined the project. I'm just going to whiz through some names. Ryan Boren. We got multiple releases out. We fixed bugs. Alex King joined the team. Many years later, I received a commendation from Alex during the US Thanksgiving, and he said, after I started my blog, I started creating custom features for it, called hacks as they were back then. Mike was active in the B2 community, and he took the time to answer my questions and help improve the code I was creating. Mike's support helped encourage me to create and release more open source code, and also taught me a few things about performance and development techniques. As much as anyone, Mike's support and encouragement helped me get involved in B2 and the WordPress community. Sadly, Alex died of cancer a few years ago, but I hadn't realized that I'd influenced in that way. And I'm going to return to it later, but it can be important to let people know that they're having an effect on you and they're helping you. I'm not going to go into technical details of things that got added to WordPress. Lots of things. Yeah, I'm going to skip through these notes. But it grew, and it grew, and it grew. Where it is today, this screenshot was taken yesterday. WordPress runs 33.6% of the top 10 million websites. That's a third of the web. It's incredible. The next nearest rival is Joomla at 2.9%, and the green bar is the market share of the CMS market. So of all the CMSs that people use, and there are thousands of them, and in fact, there's still majority don't use CMSs at all. So 44.5% don't use recognized CMSs. But of those that do, WordPress has 60% of the market share. And this is growing, and this currently is accelerating. I think it was less than a month ago we'd hit 33.3. But before we got there, I had kind of pulled away from WordPress. So by 2005, 2006, real life was a bit more important to me than the internet. And I pulled away from it and kind of just sat on the sidelines. I still used WordPress. I still had family blogs and various friends' sites on WordPress. But I didn't really follow too closely what was happening. I contributed to the odd mailing list, answered queries, and so on. And then in 2008, I went to what was the first WordPress conference in the UK. It was in Birmingham. It was held over a couple of days. There were 60 or 70 people there, all WordPress enthusiasts. And somebody on the first day, one of the speakers said, "Can I have a show of hands in the room, those who are making some or all of their income on WordPress?" And about half the people in the room put their hands up. And I looked around and thought, what the... I started this thing and I'm not making any money from it. And I there and then decided to quit my job. To be honest, I was already bored with it. And somehow figure out how to do something with this WordPress thing. So it took me till the end of the year. That was July 2008. It took me till December before I could actually leave my job. So my 3-month notice stretched that long. Great company to work for, they were. But I managed to get a few weekend jobs just before I left, finally left, set up my own company, and walked into a really interesting job. Again, through a contact at that conference. So my first official project, having left my day job and started working in WordPress, was the number 10 Downing Street for the Cabinet Office, which was a little bit scary, I have to say. Interesting fact, I went to a meeting at Whitehall, and yeah, they were really interested in me, and they said, "When can you start?" "Whenever." "Okay, come down at this date." And I said, "Right, okay, so do I come back here? Because surely I don't just rock up to number 10. "No, rock up to number 10. So I went in the front door of number 10. I didn't wear shorts like somebody did yesterday, but I think I did have no, I probably had a shirt on first time. yeah, so I worked on that for a couple of years till they took it in-house, and eventually they moved away from WordPress, which is a shame, but there's lots of other government things using WordPress. I worked on a number of other UK government sites as well, including the Ministry of Justice, DWP, various different things. That was an interesting one. It was mentioned earlier talking about security, but when I went into the DWP offices, every developer had 2 machines on their desk, one that was old enough to run IE4, and then one that they could use for more interesting stuff. But I've worked on a number of different things, and so have lots of other people. So WordPress is used extensively in this world. This is actually a really old list. There's much more impressive people using this now, including the White House. So the current incumbent, it actually changed when he came in, and it changed from Drupal to WordPress. The official website of Sweden, sweden.se is WordPress. Lots of other things. Lots of people have used it, and WordPress is, as I say, it's really grown incredibly. Whoops. Oh, come on now. There we go. And it's not just for ordinary websites either. It grew beyond blogs. It went into the good websites, corporate websites, and so on, media websites, but also social networking websites. There's a plugin called BuddyPress that allows you to turn your WordPress website into a social network. Literally Facebook in a box, although they hate that description. And it's used for good causes. There's an e-commerce add-on, which is actually the biggest e-commerce, 20%. Again, it's up-to-date figures of the top 1 million commerce sites use e-commerce now. Some amazing things. It was used when The Walking Dead first came out in this thing called StorySync that AMC put together, which allowed you to track along with the actual live broadcast of the TV program that introduced the characters just as they appeared on the screen and allowed people to talk and chat and make decisions about what they thought was going on in the TV series. Incredibly, they used it on a number of other TV shows as well. And incredibly, it got nominated for an Emmy. A WordPress website got nominated for an Emmy, which is amazing. Yeah, they used it on Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul as well. That's that same idea. I don't think we got it over here because we don't get the first live broadcast. But yeah, some amazing things. One particular one that I worked on, I still work on, is this one called I'm a Scientist, Get Me Out of Here. It's a great science engagement event run on a website that allows kids in their science classes at school to engage with scientists as part of the curriculum. It's been going for 9 years now, and it's incredible. It's all built on WordPress. We've extended it to a number of other subjects. I'm an engineer, get me out of here. We did I'm an astronaut, get me out of here with Tim Peake. It's in Vietnam, it's in Kenya, it's in the US, Spain, lots of different places. It's been really incredible. Let me catch up with my notes. What else do I want to talk about? Okay. So one of the things, oh yeah, I just want to talk about software licensing. I know open source has been mentioned a number of times. And I just want to be really particular about it because it's a passion of mine. So when I refer to open source, it's not quite the same as open source, but I refer to the GPL generally, the GNU General Public License. It has a slightly different connotation. It's more often called free software, but that free is free as in freedom rather than free as in free pizza. And it uses copyright to produce a legal hack. They call it copyleft. It uses the copyright laws to give users freedoms in exchange for developers' rights. So unlike the way that people used to think about software in those days where you would preciously hold on to your software using the copyright laws to say nobody else can have my software, GPL turns that on its head and allows you, as the copyright holder, to give the world a license to use your software. And it grants a number of freedoms. It prevents anyone from restricting anyone else's freedoms, and hence it's been called viral. But it basically gives you the freedom to modify the software, to distribute the software, to distribute your modifications, and has that requirement that nobody else can prevent your restrict your rights or restrict other users' rights. So yeah, free as in freedom, not free pizza. And actually, although we give it away for free, and we always have done, it's perfectly okay to sell GPL software. Some organizations do that. And there are lots of ways that people make money in the WordPress world. They sell themes, or rather they sell support and updates, because the themes should be GPL licensed too, which means that they are or can be freely available. Plugins, services, hosting, development, training, books, all kinds of things that people do to make money with WordPress, and so on. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry now, which blows my mind, I have to say. Hundreds of large companies, thousands of smaller companies, and hundreds of thousands of freelancers and developers. It supports a whole industry. I've talked to people who have decided to make WordPress a career, which is, again, something that kind of blows my mind. Not web development, not PHP, but WordPress. They decided to make that as their career. And also, WordPress is a community. So people often think that WordPress is a company. There's a company behind WordPress, particularly because there's this confusion around WordPress.com. WordPress.com is a service that uses WordPress to provide, or uses the WordPress software to provide hosting for WordPress sites. It does so for free, and then you can buy add-ons. That's run by a company called Automatic, which was started by Matt, the other co-founder. But actually, WordPress is built by a community, a huge community. Each release has hundreds of people listed who've contributed to that community. There's a free support forum with 4 million plus posts. There's a codex, which is Wikipedia for WordPress, with 25,000 pages of reference on there. There's 7,000 free open source licensed, GPL licensed themes on WordPress.org site, and 55,000 plugins. Just some amazing things that WordPress has. And a really big community, 700 plus user groups in 99 countries around the world. The community runs contributor days where they encourage people and teach people how to get involved in WordPress itself. I'm going to talk a tiny little bit more about that as well. It's quite a diverse community. Because it's worldwide, we're, I think, a little bit better than some other technology groups or open source technology groups in our communities, that we have a good diversity. It can be very supportive of women. It has its problems, as all do, but actually I think it does better than many. We also run WordCamps, which are volunteer-driven WordPress unconferences. They're kind of loose conferences, a little bit like this one. And they run them around the world. There's almost 150, I think, scheduled for this year. And yeah, just amazing. There's one in Lagos next month. And there's been others in other African countries. I think there'll probably be another one in South Africa this year. And also, I just mentioned job opportunities. So companies now specialize in WordPress. Many companies only work with WordPress. And they're always looking. I'm going to just put it out there. They're always looking for software engineers, designers, project managers, engineering managers, and so on. Lots of people, ethical hackers too. You don't necessarily have to work with WordPress. You can volunteer and you can contribute that way as well. Summing up, I really did whiz through this faster than I thought I was going to do. One of the things I want to mention, actually, is that you can get involved. It's not just code. So the community is always looking for people to contribute in lots of different ways, whether that's testing, whether that's running community, running user groups, teaching people, helping out. If you know more than one language, you can contribute that way. WordPress is available in over 100 languages, but they're not always necessarily 100% translated into those languages. They're always looking for people to help out with that type of thing. And code as well, and design as well. These days, it's really useful to know JavaScript as well. Increasing portions of WordPress are written in JavaScript. Just lots and lots of ways to get involved. One of the things I mentioned before about what Alex has said to me, and other people have now said to me about ways that I've helped in ways that I didn't understand at the time. I think it's really useful to do that, to thank people who've helped you in some way, because it helps them and it encourages them to continue doing that, especially if they don't necessarily know that they have. And also, as I used to do, if you're on the receiving end of that, don't dismiss it. Don't just say, oh, it was nothing. It diminishes their thanks for you, but ask them, if you don't want to take that praise on board, ask them to pay it forward. Ask them to go and help somebody else. It's a really useful thing. Be kind to yourself as well, and be kind to others. Yeah, give thanks when you can. Pay it forward. Ask people to pay it forward. What else did I want to say? Get in touch if you're interested, especially Human Made, a company I work for. We're always looking for engineers and various other roles. Get in touch with myself or Jenny, my colleague. What else did I want to say? Yeah, sometimes the smallest contribution can change the world, even if it's accidental. It's definitely worth contributing in some way to open source projects. Get involved in your local community. You can learn an amazing number of things. You meet some incredible people who will help you out and do some just, amazing different things. I kind of think I'm almost run out. Yeah, thank you very much for listening to my little story. But I've got one last favor. And I may get emotional, sorry. This weekend has been amazing so far. But growing up in the place that I did, very often only the only black face at school at times, the only black face in the community for a long time. I've been enlightened this weekend by being amongst so many black faces. I genuinely in my life have never seen so many black faces in one place. And so, if you're willing, I'd like to record that for my own prosperity. And what I'd love to do, as one last thing, is maybe just get down in the middle there, and anybody who wants to be in a photo with me, I was going to think about doing a selfie, but that never works. This thing will be in the way, this big bald head will be in the way. So if you don't mind, I'm going to do that. And those who are happy to be in the photo, we're going to get a photographer up to take a picture. And that's it, that's me. Thank you very much. Thank you.